Welcome to the Asheville Art Museum's video presentation on the history of Pack Square. This square has been functioning as the center of Asheville for nearly 300 years and has seen a lot. You will hear from regional historians discussing those events and see historic photographs that illustrate the changes that have taken place.
So the Cherokee people say that they've been here forever, that the Creator put them here and gave them their language and their customs, their traditions. And I think if we're talking about 13,000 years in terms of human history, that's pretty close to forever.
As the English settlements in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia became crowded in the 1740s, white settlers started to move south into the colony of North Carolina. King George of England's proclamation of 1763 set aside land west of the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina for the Cherokee and prohibited white settlers. However, with the chaos of the Revolutionary War, the terms were largely ignored, and white settlers encroached beginning in 1775.
In one of the early histories of the town of Asheville, some of the founding fathers said that that site was chosen because it was the oldest Indian burial ground in the area. And this, well, it seems strange to me, but I think it is that impulse of conquerors to kind of erase the people who came before and to dominate, especially sacred places. And so, as far as we know, the burial ground there was at the corner of College and Lexington.
In 1792, after North Carolina gained statehood, Buncombe County was established, and 1 year later, the county seat of Morristown was named. When Morristown was incorporated in 1797, its name was changed to Asheville in honor of the state's governor at the time, Samuel Ashe. Pack Square has been the centerpiece of the city since its incorporation, although it was known as Market Square, Public Square, and Courthouse Square before being named Pack Square in 1903 to honor one of the city's greatest philanthropists, George W. Pack. Though he was born in New York, Pack had moved to Asheville from Cleveland in 1885 and was very successful in the lumber business. For the 20 years he lived in Asheville, he gave money for lands, schools, and even teachers' salaries. Throughout the 19th century, many of the city's most important buildings were constructed along the square. The county courthouse was built in 1876, the First National Bank in 1887, and First City Hall, which housed the fire department, police department, city hall, and a public market, was built behind the courthouse in 1892. The century ended with the addition of the Vance Monument in 1898, which was funded by Mr. Pack and commemorated the life of Zebulon Vance. In 1861, as the Civil War began, men gathered in Pack Square to enlist in the Confederate Army. In 1870, the square was used as a voter registration location for African American men when the 15th Amendment granted them the right to vote. In 1893, the Young Men's Institute was one of the first African American cultural and community centers in the United States.
In the area that became known as the Block, which is just a block over from Pack Square, that area became very important to African American businesses, and an institution that played an important role in that was the YMI, which is also the acronym for the Young Men's Institute.
The building housed a variety of African American-owned businesses and clubs that catered exclusively to their community, so it became a central meeting space.
It ended up helping to create what became the hub for the African American Business District on Eagle and Market Street.
As the century progressed and as technology advanced, the square witnessed many important changes relating to transportation. In 1880, the Western North Carolina Railroad reached Asheville. As railroad travel became more popular, Asheville became known as an escape for people who wanted to experience fresh air and mountain breeze. In 1903, the courthouse, which had stood on the square since 1875, was demolished. George W. Pack provided the city with the necessary funds to build a new courthouse on College Street under the condition that the land where the 1875 courthouse had stood would become a public park and remain so in perpetuity. After the county agreed, the square became known as Pack Square in honor of its benefactor.
The place of the square in the mind of the community changed through the gift of Pack. He believed that the square should be the center of community. And the community was defined by certain functions, not necessarily the church, but the library and a performance space and that kind of thing.
The square hosted parades, gatherings for the Democratic Party, a traveling circus, and a rally for President Theodore Roosevelt. As the United States entered World War I in 1917, Asheville held a send-off ceremony for the troops in Pack Square. Following the announcement of the armistice ending World War I, crowds gathered in Pack Square to celebrate the news. A year later, in 1919, Asheville erected a victory arch on Patton Avenue to commemorate World War I veterans returning home. In 1925, Pack Memorial Library, the current site of the Asheville Art Museum, was built on the square and followed by the construction of the new City Hall and Courthouse, which still stand today. Among these newly constructed buildings was the 13-story Jackson Building, a neo-Gothic style skyscraper which was completed in the late 1920s and was the tallest building in western North Carolina. Because Pack Square and the rest of the city grew exponentially throughout the 1920s, Asheville had accrued an enormous amount of debt, which the city had planned to pay off as their economy continued to grow. However, following the stock market crash of 1929, Asheville was unable to pay the debt in a timely manner and instead chose to pay the debt over a 50-year period.
They didn't default on their bonds, which a lot of places did, and actually finally paid their bonded indebtedness off in the early 1980s and burned the note at that point. But Asheville was hit really hard. It was, primarily because it was such a boom community in the 1920s.
One of the few new buildings to be constructed during that time was the Northwestern Bank Building, later BB&T, an 18-story skyscraper which was built in 1963. Towards the end of the 1960s, Asheville began a process of urban renewal. In 1979, the East End African American neighborhood located along the east side of Pack Square was demolished.
It's left a lot of scars for the people who call that area home and feel like they lost it through this kind of federally funded project to revitalize the area. It didn't necessarily do that for the people who had lived there, and I think that's left a lasting scar for a lot of people.
Throughout this time period, Pack Square continued to develop and expand. By 1980, the Axona Building, now the Biltmore Building, a concrete and glass office building designed by modernist architect I.M. Pei, replaced the 19th century buildings along the north side of Pack Square. In 1992, Pack Square saw the Asheville Art Museum move into the historical Pack Memorial Library and the opening of Pack Place Arts and the Colburn Earth Science Museum and Education Center. The most expansive addition to Pack Square, however, came in 2009 when a 9-year-long project led by the nonprofit organization Pack Square Conservancy added a 6.5-acre park to the square. Several streets near Pack Square were eliminated to closely link the areas of Roger McGuire Green and Reuter Terrace with historic Pack Square. Because of this project, Pack Square saw the addition of wider sidewalks as well as a new stage and the fountain designed by local artist Hoss Haley. In 2015, the Vance Monument was restored and a time capsule that had been placed beneath the monument in 1897 by the Freemasons who built it was unearthed. The time capsule contained a Bible, silver coins, an honor roll from local schools, a muster roll from the Confederate Company of Zebulon Vance, Masonic documents, and several newspapers.
I think what is most significant and what I think a lot of people are most sort of shocked and surprised by is not like the list of honor roll kids and not the list of city officials, but the fact that they included the newspapers, including the Colored Enterprise. The Colored Enterprise was the African American newspaper for the time period. We knew this paper existed. It had been referenced in other books and other materials, but no one had ever really seen a copy.
Pack Square saw the reopening of the Asheville Art Museum on its southern boundary in the renovated historical Pack Memorial Library, as well as the expansion of the internal gallery exhibition space and the addition of a modern wing to house the museum's collection. This new glass structure by design architect Ennead Architects and project architect Arca Design speaks to the region's integral role in the arts since the late 19th century and onward, to the modernism of Black Mountain College in the 20th century, and bridging to the vibrant activity in the Asheville art scene of today in the 21st century.